I thought I knew my wife. I thought I knew what our marriage was. Turns out, I didn't know a damn thing. My name is Daniel Ashford, and for 38 years, I believed I understood how the world worked. You meet someone, you fall in love, you build a life together. Simple, clean, predictable. For 11 years, that's exactly what Lauren and I had done. We met in college, University of Washington, engineering and business programs that occasionally overlapped in those tedious general education courses. She was the girl who always sat in the front row, asking questions that made professors light up. I was the guy 3 rows back, stealing glances at her auburn hair catching the afternoon light. Our first date was coffee after a statistics exam. She ordered some complicated drink with 3 different syrups. I got black coffee and pretended it didn't taste like burnt disappointment. We talked for 4 hours. She laughed at my terrible jokes about engineering tolerances. I fell in love with the way she gestured when she got excited about an idea. The early years were everything you'd expect from young love. Late nights talking until sunrise, weekend trips to the Oregon coast where we'd walk miles of empty beach, a wedding on those same cliffs 2 years later, her dress whipping in the ocean wind, both of us grinning like idiots who'd figured out the secret to happiness. Lauren landed a job with a boutique wellness brand after graduation, marketing coordinator with flexible hours, mostly remote work. I got hired at Meridian Aerospace, designing components for commercial aircraft. We bought the house in Bellevue when Emma arrived. 4 bedrooms, good schools, a backyard big enough for swing sets. Sophie followed 3 years later, a whirlwind of energy who could charm her way out of trouble before she could walk. From the outside, we were the family everyone envied. Weekend soccer games where I coached Emma's team. Family dinners most nights, even when work ran late. Lauren's Instagram was a carefully curated gallery of family happiness. Hiking trips, holiday decorations, the girls in matching Halloween costumes. I worked long hours, but I was present when it mattered. Dance recitals, parent-teacher conferences, summer camping trips where we'd roast marshmallows, and Sophie would insist on staying up to count stars. Lauren and I weren't passionate like those first college years. 11 years of marriage and 2 kids will do that. But we were partners. Solid. Committed. At least I thought we were. The first crack appeared about 8 months ago, though I didn't recognize it then. Lauren became different. More distant. She'd always been social, but suddenly there were more girls' nights than usual. More time scrolling through her phone during dinner, a slight smile playing at her lips. More irritation when I asked simple questions about her schedule or who she was texting. I tried to be supportive, started cooking dinner more often, suggested date nights. Maybe we could get her mom to watch the girls, go to that wine bar she used to love. She declined, always with a reasonable excuse. Too tired, too much work. Maybe next weekend. The second crack came on a Tuesday night in March. I came home exhausted from a brutal design review, looking forward to family dinner and mindless television. Lauren was on the couch with her laptop, typing furiously. The girls were in the playroom, building elaborate forts. Over dinner, she kept checking her phone, that same slight smile appearing with each new message. "Who keeps texting?" I asked. Her face changed. Just for a second, something flickered across her features. Then mild annoyance replaced it. "Sarah," she replied. "She's having issues with her new apartment in Boston. Landlord problems." Sarah, Lauren's college friend, maid of honor at our wedding, who'd moved to Boston 6 months earlier. I nodded and went back to cutting Sophie's spaghetti. But later I found myself thinking about that expression, the way she'd locked her phone so quickly, the defensive edge in her voice. Sarah was in Boston, 3 hours ahead, almost midnight there. Not the time for casual texting about landlord problems. The third crack shattered everything. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Friday night. I'd been lying awake, mind churning through calculations for Monday's meeting. Bladder finally won, and I stumbled toward the bathroom. That's when I saw the glow. Blue light emanating from under the covers on Lauren's side of the bed. She was on her phone thinking I was asleep. Through the thin fabric, I could see her fingers moving, typing, a message sent, a response received almost immediately. That same soft smile. "Lauren," I whispered. The light disappeared instantly. She rolled over, pulling covers to her chin. She mumbled. "Everything okay? I saw your phone." "Just Sarah again," she answered, her voice thick with fake sleepiness. "Go back to sleep." But I'd heard her earlier. The soft chime of incoming messages. The gentle tap-tap-tap of fingers on glass. She'd been having an active conversation, not reading old messages from a friend 3 time zones away. I climbed back into bed. Lauren's breathing was too controlled, too deliberate. She wasn't asleep. She was waiting for me to fall asleep so she could resume her conversation. I lay there staring at the ceiling while cold certainty settled into my chest. My wife was hiding something, and whatever it was significant enough to risk middle-of-the-night conversations and lies about old friends. The next morning, Lauren was already up when I woke. Coffee made, girls dressed for Saturday soccer. She kissed my cheek and handed me a travel mug, same as countless Saturday mornings before. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Fine," I answered, studying her face. She looked beautiful. She'd always been beautiful. The kind of woman who turned heads at the grocery store. But there was something in her eyes, a distance that hadn't been there a year ago. Late that Thursday night, Lauren announced she was going to a work event, some client appreciation dinner at a downtown hotel. She'd be home late, probably after midnight. I nodded and kissed her goodbye, watching her Lexus pull away. Then I opened my laptop and navigated to her company's website. I scrolled through their events page, their blog, their social media accounts. There was no event scheduled. Sleep became impossible. Every night I'd lie beside Lauren, listening to her breathing, wondering who she was texting in the darkness. Every interaction felt like a performance now, her performance and mine. I watched her more closely, hating myself for it. The way she angled her phone away when typing. How she'd suddenly developed a preference for taking showers immediately after coming home from errands, as if she needed to wash something off her skin. The way she'd become particular about doing her own laundry, claiming she wanted to try a new detergent. New detergent. New lingerie I'd never seen her wear around me. New passwords on devices that used to be shared freely. I tried to rationalize each discovery. People change. Habits evolve. Privacy in marriage is healthy. But the rationalizations felt increasingly hollow, like trying to convince myself that smoke didn't indicate fire. The worst part was how normal everything else remained. Lauren still made coffee every morning, still helped with homework and attended parent-teacher conferences, still laughed at my terrible dad jokes and reminded me to take vitamins. If she was living a double life, she was remarkably good at it. Or maybe I was remarkably good at being blind. 3 weeks after the non-existent work event, opportunity presented itself. Lauren announced she was taking Emma and Sophie to her mother's house for the afternoon, some craft project involving painted rocks. "You should stay home," she suggested, not meeting my eyes. "Get caught up on work stuff. You've been stressed lately." The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I went upstairs to our bedroom. I didn't want to do this. Standing at the threshold of our shared space, I hoped I was wrong. Hoped I'd find nothing. Hoped I could go back to trusting the woman I'd loved for 15 years. But hope and certainty rarely occupy the same space. I remembered the old laptop in the back of our closet, buried under out-of-season clothes. The MacBook she'd used through college, replaced 2 years ago when her company provided a newer model. I'd suggested donating it, but Lauren insisted on keeping it for backup. The laptop was dusty but functional. When I opened it, her passwords were still saved in the browser, her cloud accounts still logged in. My hands shook as I opened her email. At first glance, nothing unusual. Work correspondence, newsletters, school confirmations, the digital detritus of suburban family life. Then I clicked on her cloud storage. Most folders were benign, vacation photos, insurance documents, work files. I almost closed the laptop, relief flooding through me. Maybe I really was being paranoid. Then I saw the folder labeled personal. Inside were photos that made my stomach lurch. Lauren and a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. They were at a restaurant I'd never been to, sitting closer than friends sit. His hand on her thigh. Her head thrown back in laughter. More photos, different locations, a hotel bar, someone's apartment. Lauren wearing the new lingerie I'd glimpsed in her drawer. But photos were just the beginning. Buried deeper were screenshots of text conversations. Messages backed up from her phone, probably automatically synced and forgotten. I read everything. 7 months of correspondence with someone named Garrett. It started professionally, networking, according to early messages. He worked in marketing for a tech startup. They'd met at a conference Lauren attended last spring. Conversations grew flirtier. Casual compliments became pointed observations about Lauren feeling unappreciated at home. Professional advice became personal confessions. Within 6 weeks, they were exchanging photos that belonged in no married person's phone. I scrolled through months of my wife's secret life, each message like a small knife twist. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Plans made around my schedule. Detailed hotel logistics and alibis. The book club meetings she'd started attending monthly. Fiction. She was with Garrett. The weekend spa trip with Sarah from 2 months ago. Sarah had never been involved. Lauren and Garrett spent 2 days together at wine country while I managed single-parent duty, proud of my thoughtful wife taking time for self-care. The work dinners keeping her out late? Most were fabricated. Company events requiring evening attendance? Half didn't exist. I felt sick, betrayed. But more than that, I felt stupid. How had I missed signs that seemed obvious now? How had I explained away months of increasingly transparent lies? Then I found the message that changed everything. 3 weeks old, Garrett asking, "When are you going to tell him?" Lauren's response, "Soon. I just need to make sure I'm set up right. I'm not losing the girls or the house. My lawyer says timing is everything. A few more months to establish the right financial picture, then I'll file." Lawyer. Financial picture. File for divorce. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was strategically planning our marriage's destruction while I remained obliviously helpful, picking up household duties and suggesting date nights she declined because she was too busy dismantling our life. I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of deception so comprehensive it took my breath away. Every message was another revelation. Every photo, another betrayal. The woman I'd shared my bed with for 11 years had been living an entirely separate existence, carefully calibrated to protect her interests when she finally decided to detonate our family. But instead of expected rage, something else settled over me. Something colder and more useful. Clarity. If Lauren wanted to play strategically, I could be strategic too. She'd had months to plan her exit. Time to consult lawyers and position herself advantageously. Time to document whatever narrative she intended to use against me. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I was as oblivious as I appeared. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every piece of evidence of her affair and calculated divorce plans. I backed up files in 3 separate locations, my work email, a new cloud account, and a flash drive hidden in my tool chest. Then I closed the laptop, carefully returned it to the closet, and went downstairs to start dinner. When Lauren returned with the girls 2 hours later, I was making their favorite meal. Grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles and tomato soup with alphabet noodles. "How was Grandma's?" I asked, kissing Lauren's cheek. "Good," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Mom taught them friendship bracelets. They'll probably want to make you one later." "I'd love that," I said, meaning it. Whatever happened between Lauren and me, my daughters were innocent. They deserved protection from the chaos their mother was orchestrating. 2 days later, she gave me my answer. "Daniel," she began after tucking the girls into bed. Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "I've been thinking. About us. About our marriage. I looked up from my book, arranging my expression into concerned attention. I think we should talk to someone, she continued. A marriage counselor. I feel like we've been growing apart, and I don't want to lose what we have. The performance was flawless. Slight tremor in her voice, the way she twisted her wedding ring, careful phrasing that positioned her as the concerned wife trying to save a troubled marriage. I knew exactly what she was doing, creating a paper trail, documentation of her attempts to work on our relationship before filing for divorce, evidence that she'd tried counseling, tried communication, tried everything reasonable before concluding separation was the only option. I think that's a great idea, I replied, closing my book and taking her hand. I've been feeling distant lately, too. Maybe we need professional guidance to get back on track. She smiled, relief mixed with something that might have been genuine affection. I'll make some calls tomorrow, she said. Find someone good, someone who can help us figure out what we really want. What she wanted was a clean exit with maximum financial advantage and primary custody. What I wanted was to ensure her plans backfired spectacularly. But I just squeezed her hand and said, whatever it takes. That night, I listened to her breathing in the darkness, knowing she was probably texting Garrett about her progress in setting the stage for our divorce. In the morning, I made coffee and kissed her goodbye, same as always. Then I called in sick and made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Rebecca Holt's office overlooked Elliott Bay from the 42nd floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed ferries crossing steel-gray water, while law books lined shelves behind her desk that spoke of decades navigating failed marriage wreckage. She was exactly what I'd hoped for, sharp, direct, and utterly without sympathy for romantic notions about fairness or second chances. "Show me what you have," she instructed after I'd explained the situation. I handed her printed copies of everything, photos, messages, timeline of Lauren's deception. Rebecca reviewed evidence with detached efficiency of someone who'd seen every variation of human betrayal. "This is good," she said finally. "Comprehensive. But adultery alone doesn't guarantee custody victory. Washington is no-fault divorce. Affairs matter less than you'd think." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Your wife's strategy is solid," she explained. "She establishes marriage-saving attempts through counseling, documents communication problems, then files claiming irreconcilable differences, requesting primary custody based on being primary caregiver." Rebecca leaned back, studying me with eyes that had seen this scenario hundreds of times. "You mentioned she said something about getting set up right financially," she continued. "That suggests she's planning something beyond simple divorce filing. When someone talks about timing and positioning, they're preparing to paint you as the problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked. "Abuse. Emotional, psychological, sometimes physical," she answered. "Most effective way to shift custody and financial arrangements. Create a narrative where she's the victim escaping unsafe situation, and courts become very sympathetic." I felt sick. "But I've never hurt her. Never even raised my voice." "Won't matter if she can convince a judge otherwise," Rebecca replied. "False abuse allegations are more common than people realize. Devastatingly effective, especially combined with documented affairs that make husbands look untrustworthy." Rebecca opened a legal pad and began writing. "Here's what we're doing," she said. "First, document everything from this point forward. Every interaction with your wife, every conversation about children, every financial transaction. Keep a journal with dates and times. Record conversations when possible. Washington permits single-party consent." She looked up. "Second, become the perfect father and husband. Attend every school event. Help with homework. Do more than your share of responsibilities. Make yourself indispensable to your children's daily routine." "I already do those things," I protested. "Do them more," she insisted. "Make sure other people notice. Get character references from teachers, neighbors, colleagues. Build paper trail contradicting whatever narrative she's planning." Rebecca's third point was crucial. File first. Don't wait for her to serve you. Control timing and initial narrative. If she's planning abuse accusations, we establish your version before she can establish hers. Over the next 3 months, I followed Rebecca's advice religiously. I kept detailed journals of every interaction with Lauren and the girls. I recorded conversations when possible, using a small digital recorder hidden in my pocket. I transferred paycheck portions into a separate account my parents opened, protecting assets. Most importantly, I documented my fatherhood role. Photos of school events, homework help screenshots, activity receipts I organized and paid for. Character references from Emma's teacher praising my classroom volunteering, from neighbors who saw me coaching Sophie's t-ball team, from colleagues who knew me as a stable, dedicated family man. Lauren, meanwhile, grew bolder. Lies became more elaborate and less careful. She stayed out later, claimed more non-existent work events, grew increasingly irritated when I asked innocent schedule questions. Marriage counseling sessions were manipulation masterpieces. Dr. Sarah Connor, a soft-spoken therapist specializing in communication issues, listened sympathetically as Lauren described feeling emotionally neglected and taken for granted. She painted a marriage where she carried emotional labor while I focused solely on work and personal interests. I played my role perfectly, apologetic, eager to improve, grateful for Lauren's patience in working on our problems. Dr. Connor's notes would document a husband committed to change and a wife generously giving opportunities for growth. What Dr. Connor didn't know was Lauren spent most session days texting Garrett before and after appointments, updating him on her progress building a case for inevitable divorce. One evening in May, after putting girls to bed, Lauren sat me down for a conversation I'd been expecting. "Daniel," she began, voice carefully modulated to convey sadness rather than anger. "I don't think counseling is working." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing aircraft maintenance schedules, work I could have done at the office, but Lauren seemed to appreciate when I worked from home evenings. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I don't think we're connecting the way we used to," she replied. "Even with Dr. Connor's help, I feel like we're just going through motions." She twisted her wedding ring, a gesture I'd once found endearing, now recognizing as a practiced tell when building up to significant lies. "I think maybe we need space," she continued. "Time apart to figure out what we really want." There it was, opening move in her endgame. "Space?" I repeated, injecting confusion and hurt into my voice. "Lauren, I thought we were making progress. Dr. Connor said last week our communication was improving." "It is, but..." she sighed, looking away. "I just need to know if I can be happy without constantly working at being happy. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. She needed me out of the house so she could accelerate her timeline with Garrett while establishing divorce grounds, portraying her as the reluctant party. "How much space?" I asked quietly. "I think you should stay somewhere else for a while," she answered. "Maybe with your brother? Just temporarily until we figure things out." My brother lived across town in a one-bedroom apartment. The symbolism was perfect. Displaced husband, reduced to sleeping on a couch because his wife needed space to process relationship problems. "What about the girls?" I asked. "How do we explain this?" Lauren's expression softened with apparent genuine concern. "We tell them Daddy is taking time to think about how to be a better husband and father," she replied. "That we love them very much, and sometimes grown-ups need space to work on their problems." Even her explanation was calculated. It positioned me as the partner needing improvement while casting her as the patient wife enduring a difficult period. "If that's what you need," I said slowly, "then I'll do it." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you for understanding," she replied. "I know this isn't easy, but I really think it might help us gain perspective." The next morning, I packed a suitcase and moved into Mike's apartment. Lauren hugged me goodbye, and for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if any part of her actually regretted what she was doing. Then I remembered the messages about setting herself up financially and realized regret was a luxury she'd sacrificed months ago. From Mike's apartment, I called Rebecca. "She wants me out of the house," I reported. "Perfect," she replied. How long did she suggest? She was vague. Said temporarily, until we figure things out. Rebecca was quiet momentarily. She's going to let this continue for weeks. Establish that you've been living separately, she explained. Then she'll file for divorce and custody, claiming separation was your idea or that your behavior made it necessary. What do I do? I asked. Give her exactly what she wants, she answered. Move out gracefully. Be the accommodating husband who respects her need for space. Then, in 3 days, we file first. I spent those 3 days in suspended animation. I video called the girls every evening, helping with homework and reading bedtime stories through a screen. Emma asked when I was coming home. Sophie wanted to know if she could visit Uncle Mike's apartment. Lauren was solicitous and apologetic during phone conversations. She missed me, she said. This was hard for everyone. But maybe it was what we needed to rediscover what brought us together. On Friday afternoon, Rebecca filed for divorce and primary custody. Papers were served to Lauren at her office the following Monday. According to Rebecca's investigator, Lauren stared at documents for 5 full minutes before calling her own lawyer. Then she locked her office door and made a series of increasingly frantic phone calls. By Tuesday morning, she was ready to fight back. The police officers who showed up at Mike's apartment were professional but firm. Lauren had filed a temporary restraining order, they explained. I was barred from contacting her directly, prohibited from entering the family home, and forbidden from seeing my daughters pending a hearing. The allegations were exactly what Rebecca had predicted. Emotional abuse, controlling behavior, threats of violence. According to Lauren's sworn statement, our separation hadn't been her idea. It had been her escape from an increasingly dangerous situation. She claimed I'd threatened her during our last conversation, said she feared for her safety and the safety of our children. The restraining order was emergency protection for a woman whose husband had become unpredictable and potentially violent. It was brilliantly executed, professionally crafted, and completely fabricated. But it was also exactly what Rebecca and I had prepared for. This is good, Rebecca told me over the phone that evening. I know it doesn't feel good, but her move was predictable. Now we can respond. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. 14 days during which I couldn't see my daughters, couldn't enter my own home, couldn't even call to say goodnight. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. The day before the hearing, I sat in Rebecca's office reviewing our strategy one final time. Remember, she said, this isn't about proving you're innocent of abuse. Impossible to prove a negative. This is about proving she's lying, and we have everything we need to do that. She gestured to our compiled evidence stack. Affair documentation, recorded conversations where Lauren discussed her strategy, timelines showing her allegations coincided perfectly with divorce filings, and character witnesses who would testify to my character. Tomorrow, Rebecca said, we destroy her credibility completely. When we're done, the court will see exactly what kind of person makes false abuse allegations to gain custody advantage. That night, I barely slept. In the morning, I would face my wife across a courtroom and listen to her lie under oath about the man she'd promised to love and honor. But I would also watch those lies crumble under truth's weight. King County Family Court was exactly what you'd expect from a place where marriages died. Sterile fluorescent lighting, beige walls decorated with motivational posters about resolving conflict peacefully, and the lingering smell of industrial disinfectant that couldn't mask anxiety permeating every surface. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, wearing my best suit and a tie Emma had given me for Father's Day, navy blue with tiny airplanes. Rebecca sat beside me, reviewing notes in a leather portfolio that had witnessed hundreds of these hearings. Remember, she said quietly, let me handle everything. If Dunn asks direct questions, answer simply and truthfully. Don't elaborate. Don't get defensive. Evidence speaks for itself. At precisely 1:30 p.m., Lauren arrived with her attorney. I hadn't seen her in 2 weeks, not since moving out of our house. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way that was completely calculated. Conservative navy dress, Minimal makeup that emphasized circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a style that made her appear vulnerable rather than polished. Marcus Dunn looked exactly like central casting would order for a shark in expensive suit. Silver hair, confident posture, the kind of smile suggesting he enjoyed other people's misery. Lauren wouldn't meet my eyes as they took seats across the courtroom aisle. I wondered if she felt guilty or was simply staying in character. Judge Patricia Taylor entered at 2 p.m. sharp. Younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying brown hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every variety of human self-deception play out in her courtroom. This is a hearing on the respondent's petition for temporary restraining order and emergency custody modification, Judge Taylor began. Mr. Dunn, you may present your case. What followed was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation disguised as legal advocacy. Dunn painted Lauren as a woman trapped in increasingly abusive marriage, suffering emotional torment at the hands of a controlling husband who'd grown more dangerous as their relationship deteriorated. According to his narrative, I monitored Lauren's communications, criticized her parenting decisions, and flew into rages over minor household issues. Mrs. Ashford will testify, Dunn told the court, that her husband's behavior became increasingly erratic after she suggested marriage counseling. Rather than embracing the opportunity to work on their problems, Mr. Ashford became angry and resentful. He accused her of infidelity without basis, demanded access to her personal communications, and eventually became verbally abusive. I sat perfectly still, taking notes, while Dunn described a version of me I didn't recognize. Paranoid, controlling, prone to violent outbursts that terrified my wife and daughters. Then Lauren took the stand. Her voice shook slightly as she recounted months of alleged emotional abuse. How I supposedly interrogated her about whereabouts. How I'd grown cold and distant after she suggested counseling, as if resenting her attempts to improve our marriage. The night I'd allegedly grabbed her wrist during an argument about household finances, leaving a bruise she wished she'd photographed. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, she testified, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Because he would go through it while I was sleeping. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. She described the evening she'd asked me to move out, painting it as an act of desperate courage rather than strategic manipulation. I was terrified to ask him to leave, she said, voice barely audible. But I couldn't let my daughters see me being treated that way anymore. I knew he would be angry, but I hoped maybe some space would help him realize what he was doing to our family. Instead, according to Lauren's testimony, I'd become enraged. I'd accused her of having an affair, threatened to make her pay for destroying our marriage, and promised she'd never see the girls again if she went through with divorce. That's when I knew I had to protect myself and my children, she concluded. I couldn't wait anymore. He was getting worse, and I was afraid of what he might do. It was flawless performance. Lauren's voice carried just the right mix of fear and determination. Her body language conveyed vulnerability without seeming weak. She'd provided specific details that sounded authentic while carefully avoiding claims that could be easily disproven. Judge Taylor listened with careful attention of someone trained to spot deception. But Lauren's story was consistent and emotionally compelling. If I hadn't known it was complete fiction, I might have believed her myself. When Dunn finished questioning, Judge Taylor turned to Rebecca. Ms. Holt, you may cross-examine, the judge said. Rebecca stood slowly, adjusting her jacket with deliberate precision. Mrs. Ashford, she began, voice calm and professional. You testified that your husband became suspicious of your communications after you suggested marriage counseling. Is that correct? Yes, Lauren replied. And you said he accused you of having an affair without basis. What did you mean by that? Rebecca asked. Lauren shifted in her chair. He was paranoid, jealous. He imagined things that weren't happening. I see, Rebecca responded. Were you having an affair, Mrs. Ashford? The courtroom went completely silent. Lauren's face paled slightly, but she maintained eye contact with Rebecca. No, absolutely not, she answered. You're under oath, Mrs. Ashford, Rebecca said. "Are you certain about that answer?" "Yes, I'm certain," Lauren replied firmly. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully, then approached the judge's bench. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A into evidence," she announced. She handed a thick folder to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Taylor. Rebecca provided copies to Dunn and Lauren. This exhibit contains photographic and digital evidence documenting Mrs. Ashford's extramarital relationship with one Garrett Mitchell, Rebecca explained, including hotel receipts, compromising photographs, and 7 months of text message correspondence. Color drained from Lauren's face completely. Dunn frantically flipped through pages, his confident demeanor evaporating with each image and message thread. Rebecca continued calmly. "The metadata on these photos shows they were taken on dates when Mrs. Ashford claimed to be at book club meetings or work events. Hotel receipts coincide with a weekend she told my client she was attending a spa retreat with a friend." Judge Taylor studied evidence with increasing attention. "Mrs. Ashford, do you want to revise your previous answer about having an affair?" she asked. Lauren looked desperately toward Dunn, who was still reading through messages with growing horror. That is," Lauren stammered. "Your Honor," Rebecca interrupted smoothly, "if I may continue. This next piece of evidence is particularly relevant to Mrs. Ashford's credibility." She approached the judge again with a digital audio player. "This is a recording of a phone conversation between Mrs. Ashford and her mother," Rebecca explained, "made 3 days before she filed the restraining order. Washington is single-party consent state, and my client was present for this conversation." Rebecca pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the courtroom, clear and unmistakable. "I don't care if it's true or not. If I say he scared me, the court will believe me. Women always win these things. I just need to make sure I get the girls in the house." The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren's face went from pale to ashen. Her hands trembled as she gripped the witness chair arms. Dunn looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Judge Taylor's expression hardened visibly. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, voice ice-cold, "did you just hear yourself discussing filing false abuse allegations against your husband?" That was taken out of context," Lauren replied desperately. "I was upset. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what, exactly?" the judge pressed. "You didn't mean to commit perjury in my courtroom? You didn't mean to file false allegations that could have destroyed your husband's relationship with his children?" Rebecca wasn't finished. She submitted additional evidence, timeline showing how Lauren's abuse allegations appeared only after my divorce filing, character references from teachers and neighbors who'd never observed controlling or abusive behavior, and most damning text messages between Lauren and Garrett discussing their timeline for getting rid of Daniel. The final nail was a message Lauren had sent to Garrett days after filing the restraining order. "Phase 1 complete. He's out of the house and away from the girls. My lawyer says this should wrap up in my favor pretty quickly." Judge Taylor reviewed everything in complete silence, her jaw tightening with each new piece of evidence. When she finally looked up, her gaze fixed on Lauren with undisguised disgust. "Mrs. Ashford, you've committed perjury in my courtroom," Judge Taylor said. "You've filed false allegations of domestic abuse. You've attempted to manipulate the family court system to gain unfair advantage in a custody dispute. This is not only illegal, it's unconscionable." She turned to address both attorneys. "The restraining order is dissolved immediately. Temporary custody is granted to Mr. Ashford pending a full hearing. Mrs. Ashford will be granted supervised visitation only, and I'm ordering a complete psychological evaluation before any custody arrangement is finalized." Judge Taylor's voice grew even colder. "Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the prosecutor's office for potential perjury charges. Mrs. Ashford, your actions today have endangered your children's relationship with their father and undermined the credibility of legitimate abuse victims who desperately need the court's protection." Lauren was crying now, but not the delicate tears she'd shed during testimony. These were ugly, desperate tears of someone watching carefully constructed plans collapse in real time. "Your Honor," Dunn tried weakly, "my client was emotional and—" Your client committed a crime, Mr. Dunn, the judge interrupted. Multiple crimes. I suggest you advise her accordingly. The hearing was over. I walked out in a daze, hardly believing what had just happened. Rebecca was beside me, professional satisfaction evident in her posture. Where do we go from here? I asked. Home, she replied simply. You go home to your daughters. In the courthouse hallway, I saw Emma and Sophie sitting with Lauren's mother, who'd been watching them during the hearing. Emma jumped up when she saw me, running into my arms. Daddy, are you coming home now? She asked. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her strawberry shampoo. Yes, sweetheart, I answered. Daddy's coming home. Sophie joined the hug, chattering about school and friends and all the things she'd wanted to tell me during our 2-week separation. Over their heads, I saw Lauren sitting alone on a bench near the courtroom doors. Garrett was nowhere to be found. Apparently, dating a woman in the middle of a messy divorce was less appealing when the divorce went badly. She looked up at me once, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. But maybe that was wishful thinking. I loaded the girls into my car and drove toward the house that was home again. Behind us, Lauren sat alone with the ruins of the life she'd tried to steal. 6 months after the hearing, my life had settled into a rhythm I'd never planned, but had grown to appreciate. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had been lifted from the air itself. Emma and Sophie were adjusting better than I'd hoped. Children are remarkably resilient, but they're also perceptive. They'd sensed the tension in our home long before I'd understood its source. Now, with honesty replacing deception and stability replacing chaos, they seemed more relaxed. The custody arrangement was exactly what Judge Taylor had outlined. I had primary physical and legal custody. Lauren saw the girls every other weekend, always supervised by her mother, a requirement that would remain in place for at least another year, pending successful completion of court-mandated counseling. The visits were stilted affairs. Lauren would arrive at her mother's house precisely on time, spend awkward hours trying to recreate the easy relationship she'd once had with Emma and Sophie, then watch them leave with barely concealed desperation. The financial settlement had been straightforward. I kept the house in primary custody. We split retirement accounts and other assets according to Washington's community property laws, with one significant exception. Lauren's adultery and false allegations had convinced the court to award me a larger share of our liquid savings. She was also ordered to pay child support. Her marketing job paid slightly more than my engineering salary. Lauren's life had unraveled with remarkable speed. Garrett had disappeared within days of the hearing, apparently having no interest in a relationship complicated by legal troubles and public scandal. Her employer had quietly let her go after court case details became office gossip. She'd moved into a small apartment across town and was working temporary jobs. The criminal charges for perjury had been reduced to community service and mandatory counseling after Lauren pled guilty and expressed remorse. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate required energy I preferred to spend on my daughter's happiness and my own healing. Lauren had become what she'd always been underneath the performance of our marriage, a stranger whose choices no longer affected my daily life. Emma asked about dating sometimes, with casual directness only children could manage. "Daddy, are you going to marry someone new?" she asked one morning. The question came during breakfast on a Saturday morning. Sophie was focused intently on arranging blueberries and patterns on her pancakes, but I could tell she was listening. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered. "Maybe someday." "How would you feel about that?" Emma considered this seriously. "Would she be nice to us?" she asked. "Any woman I'd consider marrying would have to be very, very nice to you," I replied. "That would be the most important thing." Sophie looked up from her blueberry art project. "Nicer than Mommy was?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I'd tried to avoid comparisons, focusing instead on building our new normal without reference to what came before. "Mommy loves you very much," I answered carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they love. That doesn't mean they're bad people, just that they made bad choices. We'd gotten Biscuit 3 months after the divorce was finalized. A golden retriever puppy who'd been surrendered to the shelter when his previous family moved to an apartment that didn't allow pets. Emma had fallen in love at first sight. Sophie had declared him the best dog in the whole universe. Biscuit was sprawled under the kitchen table now, hoping for dropped blueberries and radiating the kind of unconditional love that made everything easier. One evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" she asked. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed age-appropriate explanations with the family therapist Emma and Sophie had been seeing since the divorce. "Sometimes," I answered, sitting on the edge of her bed, "people who love each other still can't live together happily. Mommy and I couldn't agree on how to be married anymore, so we decided it would be better if we lived in different houses." Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, at least for now. Emma, meanwhile, was thriving in ways that surprised me. Her grades improved. She'd joined the school chess club and discovered a talent for strategy. But Emma's strategic thinking was channeled into positive pursuits. Organizing charity drives, planning elaborate birthday parties for friends, convincing me to adopt Biscuit through a campaign that would have impressed political operatives. One Saturday afternoon, watching Emma coach Sophie through a complicated Lego construction project, I realized something that took my breath away. I was happy, not desperate, grasping happiness of someone trying to convince himself everything was fine. Real happiness. The kind that comes from living authentically, surrounded by people who love you for who you actually are rather than who they need you to be. On Sunday evenings, after weekend adventures and homework sessions and bedtime stories, I would sit on the back porch with a beer, listening to suburbia settling into another week. Biscuit would sprawl beside my chair, occasionally sighing the deep, contented sighs of a dog whose greatest worry was whether dinner would be served on time. Sometimes I thought about Lauren, wondered if she was lonely in her apartment across town. Wondered if she regretted the choices that had led her there. But those thoughts came less frequently now, and they carried no malice. My focus was on Emma and Sophie, on building a life that would give them security and happiness, and the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally. One evening, as I helped Emma with math homework while Sophie practiced reading aloud to Biscuit, Emma looked up from her fractions worksheet. "Daddy?" she said. "Yeah, sweetheart?" I replied. "I'm glad you're our dad," she declared. The simplicity of it, the matter-of-fact delivery of something that meant everything, made me pause. "I'm glad I'm your dad, too," I answered. "Both of yours. Being your dad is the best job I've ever had." Sophie looked up from her book. "Better than making airplane parts?" she asked. "Much better," I replied. "Airplane parts don't tell jokes or give hugs or make me pancake art on Saturday mornings?" Both girls giggled, and Sophie returned to reading about a duck who'd lost his way home. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, I stood in the kitchen cleaning dinner dishes. Through the window over the sink, I could see our backyard. The swing set I'd installed last month, the garden beds Lauren had never planted, the fence that needed repair but wasn't urgent. It was an ordinary view of an ordinary suburban backyard, but it was ours, clean and honest and uncomplicated by lies or hidden agendas. Somewhere across town, Lauren was probably settling into another lonely evening in her apartment. Maybe she was scrolling through social media, seeing glimpses of the life she'd abandoned. Maybe she was wondering what would have happened if she'd made different choices. I felt sorry for her, in an abstract way. But I didn't miss her. I missed the woman I'd thought she was, the partner I'd believed we could be, the family I'd imagined we were building together. But that woman had never existed outside my own hopeful projections. What we had now, Emma, Sophie, Biscuit, and me, was real. Complicated sometimes, messy often, but authentic in every way that mattered. Tomorrow was Monday. Emma had a school presentation about the solar system. Sophie had show and tell about her favorite book. I had a design review that might run late, but Mrs. Patterson next door had agreed to pick up the girls if needed. It was a perfectly ordinary Monday approaching, full of perfectly ordinary responsibilities and small joys. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that was exactly what I wanted.